So let's talk about Eli Whitney.
I'm ready.
Hey there, Revere 311, former Marine infantryman, Revolutionary War reenactor, and amateur history enthusiast, and it was with my great pleasure to be making a second part of a Flintlock Friday episode with my good friend Nick Erickson. So Nick, today we'll be looking at this historic military musket, but before that, if you want to tell us about yourself quickly, and where are we?
Nick Erickson, Registrar for the Grout Museum District in Waterloo. We talked about what the Grout Museum District was in the last episode, right? But campus of 5 museums in Waterloo, Iowa, in the heart of the Cedar Valley. And I'm the Registrar in charge of artifacts, acquisition, and care.
And what do we have in front of us? What is the quick museum history of the gun, and what do you guys have about this piece?
Yeah, it's another musket that we would like help identifying. So, this was brought to the museum in 1981 by one Mrs. Lee Meeker, who was working on behalf of Mr. Ainsworth Bigelow, the gun's owner. And Meeker wrote a letter here that she gave to us when she brought the musket here. So, Ainsworth Bigelow is 95 years old, was born in a covered wagon 6 miles out of Clarion, Iowa. Grown up in Colberg, Iowa, cousin of Lee Meeker, the courier. One flintlock was used by his ancestors in the Revolutionary War and has been handed down to the eldest son in each generation since then. Ainsworth Bigelow has no son succeeding him. Consequently, he wants the gun somewhere where it will be cared for. The bayonet from the gun was lost in a tornado in Colberg, Iowa, many years ago. The gun was fired the last time at a 4th of July celebration about 80 to 81 years ago. So
And this was
1900.
1900, wow.
Yeah, I have a write-up I did for that field trip 3 years ago where I wrote down what I thought the gun was.
What do you think the gun is, Nick?
We're going to have a look at that, right? Again, Eli Whitney, inventor of the cotton gin, started a private musket factory in New Haven, Connecticut in 1798. He contracted with the federal government to produce 10,000 muskets in 2 years to offset slow production at the federal armories at Springfield and Harpers Ferry, where muskets were handmade one at a time. Whitney promised a new era of mass-produced firearms using water-powered machines run by unskilled labor. He was an idea guy, not a gunsmith. His 10,000 muskets were delivered to the U.S. Army 9 years late, and the parts were, in fact, not interchangeable. Whitney never suffered any ill effects from his late delivery, made a $2,500 profit, and was rewarded with a second contract for 15,000 muskets at the start of the War of 1812. Most of these he delivered after the war had ended. These muskets were also marketed as interchangeable. They were not. This musket was manufactured under the 1812 contract and is based on the Springfield Model 1812 pattern. N Haven at the lock face is the mark of the New Haven factory. The encircled P just ahead of the tang is a proofing mark. The JN stamped into the stock opposite the lock are inspector's initials. I don't remember
Writing this?
That was 3 years ago.
That's a long time.
So I don't know. If it's right, awesome. If it's wrong...
So let's get into this. This is a Type 3 Eli Whitney contract musket from the contract of 1812, so that is correct. And let's go over the gun real quick, because this is a really interesting piece. For those that watch my channel, you know about the original French infantry muskets, the model of 1766, that I talk about quite frequently. And then we also know that in 1777, probably the gold standard of French military flintlocks comes out, and that is used through the late stages of the American Revolutionary War all the way into the Napoleonic Wars. And this is a merging of those two things. The big differences you need to know about those is that the 1766s, they have flat lock plates, flat cocks, they have iron pans that are not detachable, they have about a 44 to 45 inch barrel, and they have a pretty high comb on the stock. And then the 1777s, they go down to about a 40 inch barrel, and then they have rounded cocks, they have a brass pan, rounded lock plates. For the Americans, the model of 1812 is what we can consider our first locally American designed gun, but as you can tell, this pulls very heavily from the French gun. So this is a 69 caliber smooth bore military flintlock musket, and it is stocked in American black walnut. The parts that stand out about French military guns is the caliber and also the fact that the barrel is held in by these 3 barrel bands. You have your upper, your middle, and your lower barrel band right here that are held in by spring tension. And that, to take the barrel off of the stock, you just take a screwdriver, flathead, and you unscrew the barrel by the barrel tang back here as well. And as soon as that is out, you decompress these springs, and that will, we're not going to force that because this is not my piece. So you would just take that and you would decompress the spring and slide the barrel bands, allowing you to take the barrel off of the stock to, I would imagine, for field cleaning. I haven't been able to see that in any actual document, but it means that you can take the barrel out, you can clean the barrel without having to get hot water or any sort of other liquid on the stock. As you can imagine, you don't want much liquid to hit your stock. The English style, the brown bess, as you more commonly know, those are held in by pins. I personally don't seem to enjoy those. If you see my channel, you know these things. So this is a contract gun made by Eli Whitney. And what's interesting is that we were looking at it, and we'll be going through Eli Whitney, we'll be going through the contract, and the controversy that goes with Eli Whitney. His contract almost gets canceled because the guy kind of is a little bit of a snake oil salesman. But let's just talk about the gun a little bit more. So it's got that 42-inch barrel. It was inspected by John Newberry, and I'll be showing pictures here. That is that inspector's mark right here. John Newberry inspected about 15,000 or 13,000 of the 18,000 guns provided by Eli Whitney, and he was inspecting guns from 1818 through 1824, so we can kind of gauge at when this gun was made. There's no year stamped on when the gun was made, just so you know. It has that rounded cock and it has that brass pan, and it has a flat lock plate. So the 1777s actually have a rounded lock plate, a rounded cock, and they also have that detachable brass pan. The important thing about having a detachable brass pan is it's more resistant to corrosion from repeat firing. So the iron pans, they corroded much quicker, and then also they weren't detachable. But now you have a detachable brass pan. You take the brass pan out if you needed to, and you can replace it easily instead of having to redo a lot of work on the lock. So that was an advancement for military flintlocks. The rounded, I've seen that, I haven't read it, but I've seen that the rounded, the reinforced cock makes the cock more strong or more durable over time. And we also, the interesting thing about this musket barrel, it was proofed not by the federal government or by an inspector. And we'll be talking that later, but it has just a single P in the breech of the barrel, and we were able to look that up. And Eli Whitney proofed his own guns for the contract that he was fulfilling to the U.S. government and not the Ordnance Department. Ordnance Department generally, such as the gun we did last time, the unknown maker gun from the 1808 contract, that was proofed by an inspector, and you could see the CT, which stands for we're led to believe the CT stands for contractor, and the eagle shows that it's a U.S. government proofed gun. This was proofed by Eli Whitney, but it did receive its final acceptance mark by John Newberry. So yeah, that is a quick general overview of the military flintlock. It's right before the model of 1816 takes off, which pulls more heavily from the basically almost a pretty good copy of the 1777, but it's a merging of both worlds. So it's got that 42-inch barrel instead of a 40 or a 44. It's got some flat components, it's got some rounded components, and it's got the detachable brass pan. So let's talk about Eli Whitney.
I'm ready.
So who is Eli Whitney? I'm going to let the resident historian...
No, I don't know anything about Eli Whitney.
You're going to be telling people about Eli Whitney because I don't know anything about Eli Whitney. I know he made guns in a cotton gin. So to really tell the story of the gun, we have to tell the story of the man, Eli Whitney. He he invents the cotton gin in the mid 1790s. I'm no expert on Eli Whitney.
Neither am I.
So just saying, this is just stuff I've been looking up. I know a little bit about guns, not about him. But he invents the cotton gin in the 1790s, and in 1798 he's actually given his first government contract because he has no experience with guns. But if you can make stuff, why not? If you can make a cotton gin, you can make a
Why
gun.
not? Yeah.
You can make a gun, right? And so he had little to no gun making experience when he gets his first contract in 1798. And that first contract in 1798 is pretty funny because he sells the government on the I can give you guns with interchangeable parts. We don't want to get caught talking about the 1798 contract until I can get a gun from that contract because that's its own story. He signs his first government musket contract, and he had little experience in arm productions. Some would say none. And then when he takes on this contract, and not only does he take on his first government military arms contract, he also says, I can do something that no one else has done, in America at least. Honorary Block had already done it. But interchangeable parts, and then he puts on a charade and he shows the government that he has done interchangeable parts, but he has actually not done interchangeable parts. He has just hand-fitted and numbered parts accordingly, so he knows how to put the gun together. So yeah, he gets that contract. It's are we gonna keep the laugh? We should.
No, that's fine. Keep it.
So he gets that contract in 1798. And not only does he not produce interchangeable parts, he takes him a decade to produce the guns he said he does. As any good person that has a good contract with the government, he applies for the next contract, and he's actually given another contract by the United States government. And to all those out there that are big Eli Whitney fans, I'm not doing this to make fun of him. It's just a hilarious story of how this guy was able to sell himself that he could do it above and beyond. He overpromises and underdelivers. And for any of those people out there that have never had a job, always underpromise and overdeliver. It'll go much better at your end of your performance
Who are
reviews.
Eli Whitney fans?
Who are Eli Whitney fans? Probably not many. The cotton gin really ruined his reputation. What is the model of 1812 musket? We have to remember that the two national armories, Harpers Ferry and Springfield, have been making muskets. Springfield from about the 1790s or mid 1790s, and Harpers Ferry really started up in about 1801, but it took them a while to start making long arms. And they're both making a Charleville pattern of musket. Now, this is the actual appropriate time to use the word Charleville. Charleville is the American word for French infantry musket from the system of 1766. If you've watched my videos, you've seen that before. If not, I say this a lot, but the first American-produced long arms from the National Armories are Charleville patterns, and the Springfield Armory makes 4 patterns, and the Harpers Ferry Armory makes 3 patterns. And as you could imagine, that doesn't seem to be correlate. So let's start to bring it all together and have one model of musket, and that is what the 1812 is supposed to be. In 1812, there was a conference in Philadelphia aimed at developing standardization for the new model of musket, and they chose Whitney's New York contract musket that he had been making, and they said, do that, but make that for the national government. To give a reference of what's happening, in June of 1812, the United States and the Brits go back to war with each other, and in July of 1812, this is the contract that is given out between the United States government and Eli Whitney.
This contract, an agreement made and entered into within the city of Washington and the District of Columbia, this 18th day of July, 1812, by and between William Eustis, Secretary of War for and on behalf of the United States of America in one part, and Eli Whitney in New Haven, in the state of Connecticut, manufacturer of arms on the other part, and willing, that this said Eli Whitney on the other part hereby bind and oblige to manufacture and deliver to such persons as the Secretary of War, for the time being, shall appoint to secure the $5,000 with sureties, complete for the use and service of the United States, not more than 3,000, no less than 1,500 of the said muskets, and the whole 15,000 shall be delivered on or before 1820. The said muskets in all their parts shall be made in a correct, substantial, and workmanlike manner, and shall be in all respects conformable to the model of the muskets which the said Whitney hath heretofore manufactured for the state of New York, excepting only as to the length of the barrels, which shall be each 40 inches in length. The barrels should be subject to and sustain the same proof as to that which the barrels of muskets manufactured in the armories of the United States are usually subjected. The blades of the bayonets and the ramrods shall be of steel and duly tempered. The barrels shall be proven, and the muskets inspected at the said Whitney's manufactory at New Haven by such person or persons as the Secretary of by such person or persons as the Secretary for the Department of War for the time being shall appoint for that purpose, and the said muskets shall be delivered at New Haven aforesaid in parcels of 500 each, and the first delivery shall be made on or before the first day of May next ensuing.
Before moving on to the rest of the story, there's two different lengths of barrel I was seeing in the same contract wording. So I'm using two books heavily for this video. That's going to be American Military Shoulder Arms, Volume 2 by George Muller, and U.S. Military Flintlocks, Early Years by Peter A. Schmidt. I'll be linking their books down below because they're obviously where I'm getting almost all my information. And the Muller book says it's a 42-inch barrel, and the Peter A. Schmidt book says it's 40. I'm just a guy on YouTube, so if anyone could provide clarification. At the time that we're recording this, we're trying to get it all done in one day, so unable to really clarify. So that's a little aside. But anyways, let's continue with the actual story. So that is the contract. Eli Whitney is supposed to be providing these guns, and Secretary of War Eustis actually leaves in January of 1813. And Eli Whitney had some pretty good political pull because Secretary of War Eustis he had visited the plant in New Haven before the contract was signed, so there might be some ethical issues there. And then he gives Eli Whitney a contract, then he takes off. In July of 1812, he has issued this contract that 500 guns are to be delivered by the 1st of May, 1813. And Eli Whitney signs that, and he says he can do that, and he doesn't. He doesn't deliver, and this is probably one of my favorite letters ever. Eli Whitney is, he is now late on his second government contract to deliver firearms. Secretary of War Eustis is gone, and there's a new Secretary of War in, and the Commissary General, Calendar Irvine, is just not having it. He doesn't like Eli Whitney, and this is now November of 1813. So what is this? This is 5 months after? No, it would be 6 months late on his first delivery of 500 arms, and the Commissary General's not having it. So I'm going to have Nick read the Commissary General's letter to Eli Whitney, and imagine just somebody out there spitting this hate on ink and quill.
Commissary General's Office, Philadelphia, November 11th, 1813. Mr. Eli Whitney. Sir, your letter of the 4th instant is received. I requested that a musket might be selected in the direction of Mr. Charles Williams from those manufactured by you for the state of New York and forwarded to this office that I might be satisfied for the sufficiency of those making by you for the U.S., or if found defective, for the purpose of suggesting any alterations not attended with much expense, which you informed me you would cheerfully conform to, and with a view to prevent government being saddled with any more expenses for arms, having plenty of such on hand already. If I may point out the exceptions to your musket with a view to consult your opinion, which would have been improper for very obvious reasons. First, you are not a practical gunsmith, as I have been informed, and again, you are too deeply interested in the matter. Therefore, your opinion and criticisms on the expectation taken to your musket have little weight in my opinion. You are altogether mistaken as to the truth and the bridle in the present standard French musket with bayonet fixed, and you have touched very lightly a material defect founded out in your musket, to wit, that its breeching is so miserably suited as to not be watertight. This you may consider to be very unimportant, as you say the band had been once proven, and most of the muskets made for the state of New York may have been of the same fashion. Yet my judgment, and that of practical men, in whose integrity I place infinite confidence, tell me that it is a defect for which a musket ought to be condemned. But I have neither desire or time to spare for an explanation. Your contract with government was transmitted to me from the War Department with instructions to see it faithfully executed. You have said that government has no right to ask or expect any deviation on your part from letter of the contract, this being admitted to the fullest extent. I have to reply to it that government had a right to expect and will insist upon a compliance in every respect with time of your contract, and in case of failure on your part, consider the contract at an end. You have failed to execute your engagements to the manifest injury of the service, inasmuch as you engaged to deliver 500 stands of arms complete in May 1813, whereas you have not yet furnished arms. It is therefore my duty to require you to refund promptly the money with interest has been advanced to you by the United States, which I now do. Respectfully, and etc., Calendar Irvine, Commissary General.
Interesting things in that is he also refers to them as French muskets. So Eli Whitney is now November of 1813 and hasn't produced a gun.
In his defense, wasn't his contract to be established with the Secretary of War for the time being? Which was this anyhow? Right?
So it's already, so he's
Whatever.
and the purpose of this was to get guns because of the War of 1812, right? We had declared war on the British, and it's July.
Yeah.
So 1813 comes and goes. There's no contract or no delivery of arms.
Yeah, there's a contract.
There's a contract, no delivery. 1814 comes and goes, and he hasn't delivered again. So 1815 is when the war ends, and I wasn't able to get what date. They just say by the end of 1815, Eli Whitney provides his first 1,000 guns. But to go back to 1813 is actually a direct involvement from the Secretary of War that saves Eli Whitney from getting his second military contract canceled. As you can, the Commissary General, for somebody to write a letter like that, as with anybody, you know, when you're 6 months behind schedule, that wasn't. He had said he'd already met Eli Whitney. He had been cheerful about making the altercations, and Eli Whitney's just not producing.
He's 6 months behind after the due date.
Yeah.
Right? So he's after, what is it?
It's November.
July. It's July of 1812.
Yep.
And then May of 1813 comes, and then it's 6 months after that.
And
right?
nothing has been delivered.
Yeah.
And he's sending Charles Williams, which you'll recognize his name from the first video. Charles Williams had worked at Harpers Ferry, had experience with the National Armories and producing guns. And Charles Williams was sent out by the Commissary General to actually hang out at the factory to see what's going on. And the Commissary General has this amazing letter to one of the inspectors, Charles Williams, who I referenced in the first video and who is a well-known arms inspector. Nick, take it away.
Commissary General Office, Philadelphia, February 10, 1814. Mr. Charles Williams. Sir, you will not inspect either barrels or muskets for Mr. Eli Whitney of New Haven, Connecticut, unless specifically instructed to that effect by me. Respectfully, and etc., Calendar Irvine, Commissary General.
So, as you can see, he's getting very upset. And he's not done, because who do you think he's going to go to? And this is an amazing letter that he sends to the new Secretary of War, General Armstrong. So, Nick, send it away.
Commissary General Office, Philadelphia, May 9, 1814. That's a whole year. That's a year.
A year and a half since he's signed.
Yeah. General John Armstrong, Secretary of War. Sir, I will thank you to transmit me Whitney's contract and bond. No good arms can be expected from him. He has failed in fulfilling his part. I wish to terminate his contract and cause him to refund the money advanced. Respectfully, I am, sir, your obedient servant, Calendar Irvine, Commissary General.
And what do you think happens? The contract doesn't get canceled, and Eli Whitney doesn't provide the first gun until the next year. So let's continue on with that. So in 1815, Eli Whitney does deliver that first 1,000 guns as required by the contract. And in 1816, he starts producing and receiving, and then By 1820,
And the war's over.
And the war's over.
Long over.
The war is now over. 1816, the war's over. 1817, the war's over. 1818, 1819, 1820. And for those of you that know your military flintlocks, you also know what's happening right now at the National Armories. They have actually decided to make a model of 1816. So now Eli Whitney is making a sort of, it's that funny time from 1812 to 1815. I've talked about in my model, one of my Flintlock Friday episodes about the model of 1816. Is they're trying to figure out what the model is. They settle on the 1816. I've talked about that before, but these guns are still being delivered late, and now they're not even conforming to the new model of 1816. But they're still making Type 3 Charleville. So
the White House is a pile of ash.
The White
So what
House.
are you gonna, can you imagine how frustrating? Right? Can you imagine, like, this guy with this letter, Calendar Irvin, how frustrating that must have been? And he keeps writing letters to Eli Whitney, and he's like, no, we can do.
Well, Eli Whitney was like, "Hey, I'm in New Haven, Connecticut. Like, the price of production has gone up because you've declared this war, and I'm worried that my factory is going to get burned down." So it's not. It's just a fun story overall, and I hope you guys had. If you didn't have as much fun as we did, I hope you do, because it's a great time to be alive. So this is a Type 3. This is one of the last that was delivered from 1818 to 1824. We know that because of the inspector's mark on the barrel. 15,000 guns were delivered by 1822. And what do you think the government did? They extended their contract. They got another 3,000 guns out of Eli Whitney, and that got them all the way to 1824.
There's nothing this country won't forget.
There's nothing this country won't forget. So Eli Whitney gets that extension until 1824, and one of the most interesting part, because in the contract it's supposed to be proofed as the military guns would be proofed and inspected by actual federal inspectors, and somehow Eli Whitney is able to get away with he's proofing his own barrels. So this is just a story of it's not what you know, it's who you know, and I'm sure some actual historians might be taking issue with the amount of laughter that's included. This is a YouTube channel. In conclusion, the whole 1812 to 1815, that decade is a rough decade for military arms production. They're trying to get their feet under them. And what the United States government is starting to realize is this whole idea of using contractors is not working out. They need to have a standard musket pattern that needs to be made at both of the national armories. And that's a story for a different day, and you're going to have your own problems with the federal armories because now there's a lot of nepotism and that goes on at Harpers Ferry, in which one of the actual superintendents is murdered by one of his workers who's dressed as a female. That this guy was brought in after James Stubblefield to bring around control of what's going on at Harper's Ferry, and that's in a very southern culture, and they fire this guy, and he dresses up as a female and goes and kills the superintendent of Harper's Ferry. That is just a completely side story for a video that will
No, I've never heard of that. Why did dressing like a female make it easier to murder this guy?
Because he walked into his house, the superintendent's house. So James Stubblefield had been running Harper's Ferry for decades at that point. Maybe not 2 decades, but he'd been there a while, but he was involved in the local politics, and he was giving people patronage at the National Armory in Virginia. And to the point that they would bring in Yankees from New England, from Massachusetts, from Springfield, that are producing guns at a faster rate to higher quality because they're accepting all the new machinery, and Virginia's just not doing it. So they get rid of Stubblefield because they're like, you are too involved in politics, you're just taking care of your own people. And they bring down an inspector from New England, I'm pretty sure, and he becomes a superintendent of Harper's Ferry, and he starts to regulate, you have to be at the armory for 8 hours a day. You can't just show up and leave when you want. And also, you can't drink on the job. That's not allowed anymore. Well, they end up firing a guy for being drunk on the job, and he dresses as a woman and goes in and kills him.
Didn't we read a contract earlier where wine and spirits was part of
wine and spirits
was part of the.
It actually kind of goes back in. Now we're just going to talk 19th century production. So in the book I can't remember what book it is. I'll link it down here, and then obviously it'll be sourced. But Eli Whitney said how much it cost for him to make a musket for the United States government. And this is from 1821, so this would have been the era of this gun. So how much how this cost? About $13.45 to the US government to make this gun. So what do you think would go into the production of a military musket?
So like labor,
Labor,
resources.
yeah. Resources. So what, like resources? So
Steel,
iron,
wood,
right? What are some
Uh,
other ones a little bit outside the box?
outside the box.
Or to like the coal. Coal is included to
Yeah.
run the furnace. About
Sandpaper,
sandpaper,
borax.
Files, wood
Yeah,
files.
absolutely. Yeah, the
Um,
tools. Oh, yeah, the
tools.
tools even.
Yeah, the tools are
Interesting.
got equated in. And then also there's insurance. He had insured the guns in case fire takes out the armory. But there's also one other thing, and that is wine and spirits were accounted for every single. Eli Whitney says this in 1821. He accounts for wine and spirits within the not even the labor cost, but just in production of like tools. And,
Yeah, he didn't even he didn't just increase for labor to
no,
cover his workers' booze.
no,
It's a separate item.
and it's there. So that will wrap up the two-part series I've had on the 1808 and 1812 contract military muskets. As you can see, well, the main takeaway from all of this is that the U.S. government really starts increasing production at the national armories to not deal with contractors as much. There still are model of 1816 contract military muskets, and the U.S. government is still contracting through the 1840s into the 1850s, and then with the Civil War, they go off and contract some more. But they learn a lot from the 1798, the 1808 contract, and then the 1812 contract, in which they really need to have a standardized musket pattern to be produced at the national armories, and they do work towards interchangeability of parts, which they get with the model of 1819 Hull rifle, but to a much bigger extent, the model of 1842 musket. So yeah, that's going to be wrapping up part two. This video went longer than most of my videos. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about the long form content. If you would like to see in a shorter area. I enjoyed it. It's nice to just kind of feel the moment and just talk all about the history of it, because there's so much connections between what happened in the past and what we have today. And yeah, Nick, if you want to have your final closing thoughts, and then if you want to obviously plug this amazing museum that was so welcoming to have me down here, and I really appreciate it.
Anytime, dude. Thank you so much.
Okay. That's all right. Until next time. Take care, guys. See ya.